Let's talk about the Mortal Kombat movies. Okay, and I'm talking about all of them. The two that we had from the 90s and the recent one that came out in 2021. Now, out of those three movies, in my opinion, I would have to say, believe it or not, I would have probably said the recent one, but I'm starting to second guess that. I might go with the first one. The first one it was just kind of true to the story. Because, I mean, the movies, Mortal Kombat, when it comes to the Mortal Kombat franchise, it's a little bit different. So most franchises, I mean, they have video games that are based off of shows and movies, where in this case, the movies were based off the games because the games came first. The first Mortal Kombat game, as most true Mortal Kombat fans know, the first game came out in 1992. The first movie wasn't released until 1995. And so that movie was based off the first game. And then you had the second movie called Annihilation, which was based off the second and third games put together. Now, the movie that came out, the 2021 movie, wasn't really based off of a particular game. Okay, I'm not really sure what happened there or what they did with that. I'm not going to say that it was totally poorly written. I did expect a little bit better from that one. Some of the scenes in there were kind of, exciting and kind of made sense. And then there were others like, okay, what were they thinking? I'm kind of going all over the place with this one because I'm doing three movies at once here. So bear with me. So I would say the first movie, you had, so most of your characters that you had in the first game, they were pretty much there in the first movie. I mean, on the good side, you had Liu Kang, Sonya, Johnny, Jax, Raiden, and of course Kitana, who was initially supposed to be one of the bad ones, but then later switched to the good side. And then on the bad side, you had Shang Tsung, Goro, Kano, Reptile, and even Scorpion, who is supposed to be a neutral character, but I mean, there's a lot going on there. And Sub-Zero, which is really the elder Sub-Zero, not the one we see today. And I'll tell you right now, so that you can say that there was some cheesiness to it, but compared to the other two, it made a lot more sense. When you look at Annihilation from 1997, I think the story made sense. I think the story itself and the context was just fine. I think how they did it was a problem. I think that it was way too corny and cheesy. And I remember watching it as a kid and a teenager, and I thought it was so cool. But now I kind of look back at that and like, what were they thinking? Now, granted, I understand it was the 90s and you could only do so much then, and technology was only, so far up to date at that point. There were definitely some parts of the story that I could have done without and that weren't relevant and didn't need to be there. I mean, Raiden and Shao Kahn being brothers. They mentioned that Stryker and Cabal had been killed off and we never got to see them. I understand that they may not be quite as popular as a Scorpion or a Sub-Zero or a Liu Kang, but I mean, we do kind of want to expand the character base and talk about some of the other characters and give them some more presence, some more prominence. Now, I'm looking at some of the reviews from Annihilation here, and most of them are pretty much the same. I do see a couple 5 stars here, surprisingly. Here's what one 1-star said about Annihilation. 1 out of 5. You and I are better off watching the first original installment than this sequel. Compared to its amazing predecessor, the sequel, Annihilation, is shallow, unoriginal, forgettable, corny, dopey, and its tradition feels more like a Saturday morning entertainment that is made for television. Sure, it may have its tongue-in-cheek feel like its predecessor, but its tongue-in-cheek feel right here went way too far, as if it was made as a joke, a painfully unfunny joke. I was not immersed into this world anymore because there have been more corny green screen effects than using real locations. You know what? Some of that I could kind of tell as well. Yet there were some convincing rooms, but again, watch the first installment. I'm surprisingly disgusted by the fact that even though it had a $30 million budget, higher than its predecessor, the visuals and the effects look more cheap and more weak in execution, and I have noticed that the effects are a little more stiff and there were glitches. Liu Kang's dragon design is not what we had in mind at all. The dragon was supposed to be a green coiled Chinese dragon. The filmmakers have no patience or hardly any sophistication for the craftsmanship as well. The action sequences are mediocre and some of the slow motion is not well utilized. Another problem is that when the actors were fake fighting, there were times where the actors did not move in time when they receive a hard blow. As for the story, I was not invested into the story because it used the same intro, and I could not help but noticing how weak and uninspiring the plot is, and how overwhelmingly bad the visuals are. George S. Clinton is back to compose the music score. But, unfortunately, his score here is dull, unoriginal, and tacky. Most of the acting is poor, and some of the dialogue should have been written better. As for the antagonists, they leave a lot to be desired because dialogue should have been written better. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm looking at the wrong line. As for the antagonists, they leave a lot to be desired because they barely have anything interesting. Robin Shu, or Robin Shao, I think his name is pronounced Shu, did return as Liu Kang, but his performance here is more soulless. But Liu Kang is still one of the protagonists that I root for ever since I saw its predecessor. Okay, let me stop right there right quick. I didn't know this person was going to have this much. So I do agree with a good amount of this. So I agree that it seems like they had no patience at all. The action sequences are mediocre. Some of the slow motion is not well executed when the actors were fake fighting. So, and here's the thing. Let me look at some of the others. I can officially say this movie sucks. Its storyline is so bad that you can't even understand what the heck is happening. Okay, well, here's the thing. It's like I understand what's happening in the story. As somebody who's a true Mortal Kombat fan and who's been, I've watched and embraced pretty much everything in the Mortal Kombat franchise except for the comic books and a couple of the shows. I did watch all the movies. I played all the games. I watched 2 of the TV shows. One was called Legacy. The other one was called Conquest. And then there was also an animated movie called Scorpion's Revenge. That was good. There's another animated one that's on HBO Max and on YouTube. I haven't gotten to it yet. So I do think that there were a lot of scenes in that movie that it just makes you wonder, what the heck were they thinking? I remember a scene in the movie where Kitana was fighting Baraka. And, because Kitana has her fans, her steel fans, but those don't even look like, it's like some type of a metal thing. And it's like the blades on the fan they're not metal. It just looks like some piece of plastic. And when she sliced his neck or sliced his chest or whatever happened with that, they didn't even try to make it look like it was real blood or to even make it look like that. It just looked like some, I don't know, red paint or the way that it came out. I mean, it was just entirely too cheesy. But again, I understand what's happening with the story. The story is, again, it's based off the second and third games, which is bouncing off of the first game, or coming after the first game, which is that Shao Kahn, who was the main bad guy in the second movie, tried to take over Earthrealm. He runs Outworld, and he's got his team of bad guys like Motaro and Shiva and Rain and Reptile and Noob Saibot and Baraka and Melina and quite a few others. Sector. I'm sorry, no, Sector wasn't in that movie. So he's got all of them. And it's basically just, he's upset that he lost the tournament to Liu Kang. He sent Shang Tsung to go destroy Liu Kang and the people, but Shang Tsung ended up getting killed in the first movie. So Shao Kahn tried to take over Earthrealm, and that just didn't go well for him. I get what happened there. It was just how they did it that was entirely too cheesy. Let me see I'm curious to see what the rest of this is, because I hadn't read this before. Christopher Lambert, who's the actor who played Raiden, Christopher Lambert's Raiden, who played Raiden in the first movie, is much better than James Remar's Raiden, James Remar from the second movie. Take on the character here. James's Raiden is quite cursory, and his final appearance in the second half of the film makes it look like a regular, plain, white bread father. Sandra Hess is a forgettable replacement for Sonya. Lynn Red Williams plays Jax. As a character, he is a one-dimensional, unlikable character, even if he is supportive. Talisa Soto returns as the likable Kitana, and it turns out that Kitana is Liu Kang's love interest. Brian Thompson as the masculine Shao Kahn may just be your average masculine bad guy from any retro Saturday morning television program, but compared to Tagawa's, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that name right, I'm probably not. Tagawa's Shang Tsung from the first installment, Thompson's Shao Kahn is a joke in both appearance when his helmet is off and performance. He does not have a backstory or does not have any depth at all. Well, yes and no. I mean, again, his backstory is, and this is the part where they messed up with the movies. A lot of the characters' backstories are more so explained in the games than the movies. That was the one part that they didn't clarify. So, I mean, there is a story to it, but, I mean, if you've only watched the movies and didn't play the games, I can see how you would miss that piece of information. But, I mean, I get it. I can't totally criticize that. Musetta Vander's Sindel is an antagonist that I cannot take seriously with her lack of motivations, mediocre performance, and her huggable costume. While she may have an evil grin, she could just be some nice happy lady that would want to be friends with you. Irina Pantaeva's Jade is a manipulative supporting sidekick for the villains, yet Irina's performance is a bit awkward. In conclusion, Annihilation has destroyed everything that made its predecessor so beloved, and it is one of the worst films I've ever seen, not recommended. Well, you know what? So anybody who's a Mortal Kombat fan, like I said, if you've seen Annihilation, you get it. This was just not... This film could have been much better. I've already said this. I've said they need to take each of the Mortal Kombat games and make a movie that is based off each of the games. Okay, Mortal Kombat 1, do a movie on that. 2, 3, don't try to combine them together. Mortal Kombat 4, which I think is a little bit underrated because it was the last game that was in the arcades and they put it for home system, and every game after that wasn't in arcades anymore. Mortal Kombat 4, the base of that game was about Shinnok's invasion of Edenia, I believe. And they never bothered to try to make a movie about that. Now, they did kind of reference that in MKX where they kind of rebooted the story, but that was for the game. They need to do that for a movie and make it look more realistic. I mean, you've seen all these action movies and all these superhero movies and all these stuff. I mean, you've seen the Avengers and you've seen all that type of stuff, Thor and Marvel. Like, you've seen these type of movies. It wouldn't hurt them to try to do something like that. Now, do I think that it would gross anywhere near the amount of money that an Avengers would gross? Not even close. And no, there's nothing Mortal Kombat could do that would gross $1 billion, $2 billion. They can't do that because the actors and actresses that they had play for those roles they're not big names to the level of a Robert Downey Jr. or a Chris Hemsworth or, people like that. So, now as for the latest movie, I'll be honest with you, I can't even remember a lot of it directly off the top of my head. I do remember some characters had some good fight scenes. I remember Liu Kang and Kung Lao. Why they made Sub-Zero the bad guy in that, I'm not entirely sure. They had Shang Tsung in there, but he was almost more like a side villain than he was the main villain. So that kind of threw me off right there. Now, what else was there? You had some characters in there that were from the games that they had a character named Nitara. Nitara, who's a vampirist, who debuted in the game Mortal Kombat 5 Deadly Alliance. Why did they choose to put her in the movie, but there were some other characters that you had before her that debuted before her in the games, but they weren't given a chance in a movie? They still never showed Cabal, Stryker. What? Again, so I think overall I would say this. I would say that as far as some of the action scenes in some of the movies, some of it is attention grabbing, yes. I think that the best fight scene is still Liu Kang versus Shang Tsung in the first movie. And you can maybe kind of say that Liu Kang versus Shao Kahn from Annihilation was like the best scene in that film. It was kind of all right. It was still a little bit cheesy, but could have been done a lot better. Overall, I would say this. Here's my idea. And I say this to everybody who put the Mortal Kombat franchise together. Do movies that are based directly off of the games, okay? The script doesn't necessarily have to be verbatim, but keep it in that parallel, keep it in that path. Do a movie based off the Deadly Alliance. Do a movie based off Deception. Do a movie based on Armageddon. And do a movie based off MK4 because we've rehashed the story in the first 3 games so many times that a lot of people consider it to be redundant. And again, I'm saying this as a person who is a huge Mortal Kombat fan. Okay, I love the Mortal Kombat franchise. But again, if we're going to be honest with ourselves and we have to be true to ourselves, let's just say, hey, criticism is going to be where it's needed. I'll give credit where it's due. I'll give criticism where it's due. And again, credit to them for doing the movies. But just kind of step it up a bit here. Step it up. Now, there is talk that there's going to be a sequel to last year's movie. And Johnny Cage is supposed to be in this movie. I don't know if he's going to be like the main protagonist or if he's just going to... So, I mean, I'm curious to see how that's going to go. I was really excited for the last movie to come out, but it was kind of a downer. But, and I know many people here who are Mortal Kombat fans. I mean, you might have different opinions, and that's perfectly fine. You know, some of you might think Annihilation was excellent. And I used to think that at one point. But overall, I still say that the games are much better than the movies. Mainly in terms of the story and also in terms of the dialogue. So I'm just curious to see where the rest of that goes. If you're curious to see some of the reviews on the Mortal Kombat 2021 film, let me get into that right quick here. I told you this was going to be all over the place, so bear with me. Now, let's look at some of the 5 stars with this movie. So I've watched this movie twice now. I bought the first available ticket at Suncoast Cinecenter on its release date. I must admit, even though, you know what, I'm still looking for, I'm trying to figure out how to do it. I'll save that for a different video. I must admit, even though there is no tournament per se, it's still, in my opinion, the best Mortal Kombat movie so far. It has a definitive story, unlike many of the previous movies. It opens with Hanzo Hasashi, Scorpion, returning to his compound to greet his wife who is gardening. As he goes to the river to fetch water, his baby daughter starts crying and her brother is tending to her. Mrs. Hasashi, Scorpion's wife, follows in to check on them, and suddenly the sounds of fighting erupt. I'll not ruin the story for you any further. It's well etched and fairly detailed. Essentially, after the Hasashi family are massacred, we meet Cole Young, Louis Tan, the hero of our story. So anyways, let's get down to it. I love this movie because everything that annoyed me about the others was corrected here. Liu Kang is amazing, even though he's not the central protagonist. Yeah, it's kind of odd that you got Liu Kang and something he's not the central. There's that. And then he says, okay, I'm not going to spoil the rest of it. I'm going to stop right there. Best Mortal Kombat movie ever. Very well written. Impressive performances. Incredibly engaging. Okay, that's fair. I am a huge Mortal Kombat fan, and I was waiting for this movie for months. This movie is good, but it has room for improvement. The plot explains to us the premise of the story, and the characters are well written, and they react appropriately to their surroundings and all of the bizarre things that they encounter in their way. Their performances are spectacular. In this movie, the main highlight apart from the gore is the incredible performance of the actors. Okay, yep. So, I mean, hey, so anything that's a Mortal Kombat show or movie that you want to watch, it's available to watch on HBO Max. Some stuff, most of it you can also rent or buy on YouTube or Amazon, whichever you prefer. So, I mean, that's kind of my take right there. And again, I think that's enough for now. I will be discussing some more Mortal Kombat and other videos.